Hey folks, sorry for the delay on getting back to you with the questions from Concepts of Kink. I got totally slammed with a whole bunch of work, but I have not forgotten. What I have forgotten is what questions from here I've already answered, so I'm just going to answer them all. Alright, let's get going. There's a big stack of these to do. Are there safe words used during consensual non-consent scenes? That's a really weird question because, well, it's not weird to ask. It's a weird one to answer. The short of it is yes. Most consensual non-consent scenes have some way by which they can be ended. There's sort of an agreed-upon idea that we're not going to use them. That's what makes it consensual non-consent, is this idea that we're going to not use our safe words, unless things really go, tits up. Yeah. How does the disability portion of your resume supplement the other topics you lecture about? That's a good question. Primarily, well, the disability stuff impacts in two ways. My background is disability education and particularly designing equipment for people with disabilities, which works into a lot of what I do as far as things like designing scenes and figuring out how to do adaptation around disability in scenes. And I teach quite a bit on the topic of kink and sexuality and disability. Everything from how do we discuss disability issues or varying ability issues with play partners, to what are some modifications we can make in terms of how we structure our play to deal with various levels of accessibility, to how do we use disability issues as a positive in play, which is not saying everyone wants to go to, but very much can be. So, for instance, I taught this class not that long ago, and there was a woman relatively recently disabled in an injury, and she identifies as a dom. And her big concern was, how do I assert dominance and authority, as someone who now has this disability issue? One of the things you're talking about is that she couldn't get down on the ground to play with people the way, or to, be there for her sub. And I said, well, have them play on a bed so they're at eye level. And she'd said, well, I don't know how to talk to them about that. How do I say, I need you to do this thing? And my response was, you say, hey, get on the fucking bed. And that had never occurred to her, that she could sort of contextualize disability and dominance in the sense of, giving an order. The other example I always tell is that I may have mentioned this in the class, the most fucked up scene I ever saw was a dom who did orgasm control with his sub, and she hadn't been allowed to come for like a week, and he sat her down at a table. She had dyslexia, and he sat her down at a table with her Hitachi locked and a crossword puzzle, and said, when you finish it, you can come. And it took her the whole fucking day. And that was, working with her varying levels of ability or disability for a kinky end. I thought it was super disturbed. All right. If no sexual activity is allowed, what actually happens at a play space? That's a really good question. So, part of that is that everyone defines sex differently. As I talked about in the class, a lot of spaces don't allow any genital contact or any penetration, and that's what they mean by sex. Definitely, there are a lot of spaces that are not open to any sort of sexual play, although that's changing a little bit. So what happens? Well, everything else. You have an enormous range of kinky things which aren't what we think of as sex. And I know people in very serious long-term BDSM or kink relationships that have no, getting our junk involved to them. They are essentially non-sexual relationships. So you have, people being tied up or flogged or single-tailed, or depending on the space, you might be allowed to do fisting because not everyone contextualizes. Fisting's in that weird gray area where you don't really know if is it sex or is it kink? I sort of figure it depends on how much you're actually making a fist or making it easy. Sex, kink. That's totally not fair, but I thought it was cute. What else? I mean, I do a lot of needle play, so I've never had, in all the years I've done needle play, I've never had sex in the context of needle play. I've never been doing a needle scene and in the middle of the scene be like, okay, now suck my dick. Because that type of play is very, very technical and you need to be really focused. I've done some sexual blood play stuff, but I haven't done sexual needle play. What other things do I see in a dungeon? I mean, I see fucking machines, which is another one of those ones where it would really depend on your space. If the issue is legality, you probably would not be allowed to do fucking machines. A lot of impact, you know, punching, kicking, canes, shambox, a lot of rope. I mean, most play spaces I go into these days, I would say like 50% of what is happening is someone is being tied up. And a lot of people, bondage doesn't have anything to do with sex, especially because suspension has become so popular, and suspension is, you know, very much not associated with sex. There are a few suspension artists I know who do like sex as part of, a lot of people I know do sex as part of rope, but as far as like suspension, I only know a few people who do. Also, there's a lot of standing around. Most play spaces only have so much equipment. So there is a lot of standing around and chatting, hopefully quietly. There's a lot of voyeurism. Most play spaces have some sort of rule about how you're a voyeur. So like at Dark Odyssey, which is the company I work for, we totally respect that people want to be voyeurs. We say like you need to respect an area of exclusion. Like you can't be like, hey, what you doing? You have to really sort of give people space and privacy, you know, observe from a distance. There's some other things I would see in a dungeon. Wax play is one that you see a lot, which is sensual but not sexual. Knife play is the same way, although not all dungeons will allow knife play. Massage, fire play is another one. Again, it's all about your spaces. Every space has different rules. I really like fire play, but there's a lot of hotel events where they're like, yeah, the hotel's not going to let us do that. All right. So this is a really, really good one. I liked this. It seems as if there's little room for spontaneity in the model of kink as you describe it. If a couple's in their kitchen and one of them pulls out a spatula and is just playing with it, do they need to go through all these detailed discussions first? No. Most of what I talked about in the class was contextualized around building a kinky relationship or about pickup play. You know, hey, I'm at an event and you're cute and you think I'm cute or not interesting in some way. We should do something. I mean, if you've got a couple, presumably whipping out the spatula and suggesting doing a spanking scene with it is not the first time the topic of kink has ever been raised. If it is, yes, you should have a conversation. If there's some understanding that, you know, we're in a relationship and sometimes we do kinky shit, then take out the spatula and go. You know, I assume, you know, you're in your kitchen, you probably know if the person who you, let's say, live with or see on a really regular basis is, you know, has a bleeding disorder, which is one of those things when I think about impact, like someone who's on meds that could cause bleeding or whatever, those things I worry about. But yeah, absent that sort of stuff, absolutely. I mean, I do plenty of kink with very, very, very little negotiation, and what distinguishes that is it's people I have done this kind of play before with. And even people I haven't played very much with, like I played with a woman not that long ago. We did a needle scene, the first one I'd done in a while, and we had never played before, but I knew that she was a pretty heavy needle player. I'd seen her play before, so a lot of the conversations and negotiation that I would do as a rule, I didn't. I didn't go through all the like, needle play is risky. I was like, you understand that there's risk to this? And she was like, yep, been doing it for a while. And that's all we said. I did my usual, like, can you give me a sense of how your body reacts to needles? Because that's really the only information that contest, other than where do you not want me to stick you or where do you really like being stuck? All right. What are your suggestions for people in the kink scene who struggle with anxiety, especially social anxiety, and have difficulty communicating their desires verbally? Are there forms of nonverbal signals you can suggest, or exercise doms and subs can do together? So there's a lot of people in the kink and BDSM world with social anxiety. I would say a disproportionate number to the population. And part of that is that all these structures that I kind of was just a little dismissive about around negotiation and discussion and spelling things out can be really good for people with social anxiety. You have to get over that hump of engaging, but then there's a structure to engage with. There isn't as much feeling of, I have to, this is a fuzzy situation, I don't really know what I'm doing in it. There's, unestablished ideas of how to engage. As far as difficulty with communication and desire, one thing that I don't personally do, but I know a lot of people do, is when they're in a position where they're ready to interact with someone, they're interested in interacting with someone, they have a giant, giant list. It is, the list of fetishes I read during the class? It's like half again that. And you can actually find these online. Some play spaces provide them as well. And it is a checklist, and two people go down their checklist, and they mark off things they're interested in, things they're curious about, and things that are hard limits. And then you compare your checklists. And if you've got good points of commonality, you can go from there. And it saves having to have that sort of vulnerable conversation, which is not always easy to have, of like, so I really want to be tied up, And I'm not trying to be snarky about that. I mean, people really are very shy about it. And one of the things that's important to remember whenever you talk about negotiation, with or without a social anxiety component, is that what some people find emotionally challenging to be interested in, others do not. And it is really, really, really good idea to always take people as they are. And if someone says, like, I have this desire and I have shame around her, it's something I'm so scared to talk about, and they tell you something that you feel is no big deal, it's really important to still honor that it is a big deal to them and that it's scary to them to talk about it. And just saying like, oh, that's nothing, is not supportive, it's dismissive. And that's really important to keep in mind. As far as nonverbal signals, that's a tough one. We talk about this some in my disability class when I talk about kink play and autism spectrum disorders. That's more from the opposite side of missing nonverbal cues. A lot of the stuff that we talk about around things like safe words or signals can be done in very nonverbal ways. I mean, there's the classic example of handing someone something they can drop. That's done a lot with both people who are hearing impaired and people who are gagged in some way, who can't safe, where you give someone like keys or a bell or something that they can drop that signals that they're safing. There was a scene in another gay movie or whatever it was called with a honking horn from a bike that I thought was quite funny. As far as exercises, between DOMs and subs, you can, if you are careful, do DS-oriented discussion where you're going to have a conversation. And that's going to be a scene because that's hard for someone to do. It's not, it's someone who isn't comfortable or has a hard time having those sorts of conversations. So instead of trying to make them be organic, you slap them into the structure of a scene. And say, like, the kind of heavy, tough play we're going to do is you're going to actually talk to me about what you want. I would consider that to be a form of emotional edge play, but it's certainly something that can be done. All right, moving on. Can you comment on the importance or lack thereof of orgasms in kink? Sure, I can do that. That is incredibly personal. And incredibly play-specific. Some people aren't having fun unless their bits get wet and or hard or they come. Well, and or I would say they come. Other people do not give a crap about that. For me, I would say, personally, orgasms are involved in 15% of the play that I do. Maybe less. for me and for a lot of people, kink is about a kind of engagement and a kind of interaction, and that is independent of sex. It is erotic without being sexual, or it is interpersonal without being sexual, or it's sexual without being orgasmy. I look at it this way. Some people like to get dressed up in really sort of sexy clothing and go out on the town because it makes them feel good. And maybe that's something they do with a partner. We're like, oh, we're going to go out and you're going to be super hot and everyone's going to stare at you and we're both going to feel good about it. That is sexual in many ways, but orgasm is not usually involved. Unless I guess you're on an airplane, it's a Mile High Club thing. So I would say as a rule, culturally, orgasms are not considered to be a central part of kink experience, but there are certainly many people for whom kink is purely sexual. Purely is a really loaded word. Pretend I didn't say that. Kink is sexual for a lot of people, or certain kinds of play are sexual for a lot of people. And in those circumstances, perhaps orgasms are much more important. As a rule, orgasms aren't something that tend to be a major feature in kink play. Voyeurism and exhibitionism. Does this fall into the kink category? I think I actually did cover this one in class, but I'll mention it anyway. For many people, yes. There's certainly people who have kinks around exhibitionism and public, whether it be public sex, public nudity, risky sexual situations. There are people for whom that is very much sort of a kinky thing for them in a way that they get off in that way. For other people, no. And I'm sure there's some exhibitionists who would be like, I'm not a kinky fucker. I just like to have sex on mini golf courses. Little Family Guy reference there. That's fuzzy. Almost everything in kink can be looked at as being kinky or not. Certainly, it is a popular fetish and a popular kink activity. That is why outdoor festival style kink events are so popular, because, in many of them you can just scene or fuck just right out there. The two summer festivals the company I work for does, Dark Odyssey Fusion and Dark Odyssey Summer Camp, the only places you can't fuck or be completely naked is the Dining Commons. Okay, the Dining Commons is the only one we can't be completely naked. And I mean, like, loincloths are fine. And the pool, where you can be naked, you just can't fuck in the pool. You can fuck next to the pool, but not in the pool. Everywhere else in the 200-acre camp, you can go ahead and fuck. And that is because for some people, exhibitionism is a major turn-on. Definitely that. In a community like, I think it refers to college. In a community like here with limited access to public play, club play space for clients with the safest way for couples to learn about riskier play, i.e. waterboarding, fire, needles, and I'm guessing that says Maine, in a place like Maine. We could all get together and start a local club. I think that'd be awesome. I would love to run a local club or be part of a local club. But in the meantime, there actually are quite a number of classes in our area. I teach classes down at Arundel almost once a month at My Essentials. There are other places in the area where there are classes on things that involve riskier play. This is, for the most part, not stuff I'm super keen on people learning from the internet. My suggestion is very much go to an event. And there's a kink event, it's a little 101, but it's supposed to be pretty good, in Portsmouth every year, KinkyCon. There's a Fetish Flea down in Providence, Rhode Island. I think there's actually a Fetish Flea up here too. I don't know if they do as many classes. What else? Certainly there are some local playgroups in the area, more up in the Lewiston, Auburn, and Bangor areas, but there certainly are. And sometimes they bring in educators, or you go on FetLife and you look for people who are really knowledgeable in your local area. I've had people contact me for lessons on sounding and needles, certainly in the past. That's really it. I definitely think that participating in FetLife groups oriented around the thing you're interested in is really useful. If nothing else, it's a great way to learn what not to do, because people are really big on being like, hey, I did this thing and it was a really bad plan. I get a lot of that around sounding stuff. People emailing me about sounding with McDonald's straws and it not going well, or glass thermometers. But yeah, most major educational events have classes from sort of a 101 level to like really, really, really intense stuff. Like we had last event I was at had a big blood play thing, and they also had a so you want to learn type people up and everything in between. All right. What is a Vault 1 and what is Shibari? I feel like I hit that one too, but I'll go real quick. Vault 1 is a quack medical device from the 1800s, which uses a little baby Tesla coil to create static shocks, not unlike touching a doorknob when you're statically charged. Only it has control. And it can be used for anything from sensation play to incredibly intense pain or even branding. Shibari is a term for Japanese-style rope bondage. Often associated with being pretty, Shibari also can be extremely effective. How do people with kink interests find others with those same kinks? And or how do you approach that subject? The best way I've found as far as like how do I find kinky people is FetLife is not a bad place, although it's very much not a dating site. And John Baku is very clear, the person who designed it runs FetLife, that he deliberately designed it not to be able to be used as a dating site. A lot of people who are open about being kinky put their kink interests out on like OkCupid. And OkCupid is a pretty kink-friendly place, actually. Polyamory also. Other ways. Going to a local munch. A munch is a non-play meetup for kinky people, usually at a restaurant that is more interested in money than not catering to the freaks. I'm a big fan of going to classes, probably because I'm an educator, and going to a class and something you're interested in, and then striking up a conversation with someone who's in the class is no bad plan either. As far as broaching the subject of kink, especially with someone who maybe you've met up with and they don't know that you're kinky, that's a tough one. The biggest thing there is to bring things up in a positive way. There's this whole idea of like, hey, this is a fun thing I'm telling you, not a, oh my god, I have to confess this horrible secret. That's a pretty bad way to tell someone something that isn't actually a horrible secret. If you're doing that, you can feel people out, hey, have you ever seen the movie Secretary? That sort of thing. Ask leading questions, or just be open. There are a lot of people I play with who are not kinky, and we don't really do kinky stuff, but I'm always really open about being kinky. I will admit, there is a certain bizarre kind of privilege that comes from working professionally in the kink world that lets me get away with that. If I was a preschool teacher, this whole process would be a lot harder. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of great input for the preschool teachers. I am in a relationship with someone who is very conservative and thinks lovemaking should be soft and caring. I have a variety of BDSM experiences before with a long-term relationship as a dom, and I loved it. Never really liked it sexually, but I loved the rush. Do most people get sexually turned on? How to approach the topic of wanting BDSM with my girlfriend? Lots of people don't get turned on. I don't think I very rarely get like the classic physical, like, oh, this guy has an erection responses to doing kink. It just doesn't really, meh. I'm usually too focused on what I'm doing. That rush is why a lot of people do it. There's a whole sort of ineffable quality to kinky interactions, especially dom-sub stuff, that is independent for many people of sex, as we've talked about a bit. As far as how to bring it up with a partner, I guess that depends in large part on if your partner already knows. If you're with someone who knows you're kinky and has been super clear that that is not on the table, you may be kind of screwed. As far as always wanting lovemaking to be soft and gentle, there are ways that kink can be super soft and gentle, and that may be about finding compromises. There are ways that one can be dominant in bed in a nurturing, caring, but still dominant way. There are a lot of things you can do with sensation play, which is very kinky, but isn't painful or mean. There's also conversations worth having around why someone wants things to always be loving and gentle and what that sort of means to them. There are people who really have a hard time making the jump to the idea of kink with love. And sometimes that's just about feeling out what people's idea... Remember we talked at the very beginning when I said, like, not of this, of the class, where I said that everyone defines kink differently? Sometimes when people are really big on the idea that, like, kink is anathema to gentle or caring or loving relationships, their picture of what it means to be kinky is quite narrow. And expanding some horizons about various forms of kink play that are more nurturing or gentle or loving can be really, really useful there. But the fact is there's some people who are not down with kink, and you may find yourself in that situation. In that case, if you are in a relationship that's open to poly, you could find kinky play partners. If you're not in a relationship that's open to poly, there's a lot of good kink erotica out there. Particularly this person's in a lesbian relationship. There's a lot of lesbian BDSM erotica out there, much of which doesn't suck. The supply of lesbian BDSM, like, moving pictures or still pictures porn that doesn't suck, pretty small. But erotica, that does pretty well. And for some people, that can cut it. So that takes us through the questions. If I didn't answer something, it is possible that I've lost a form. If I lost one or didn't answer something, or you realize you have another question you'd like to ask, you can always find me on the web at barkingshaman.com. All my contact information is there. You can look me up on FetLife as Wintersong, because I like to keep things relatively simple. Hope you guys had an amazing time at the class. Sorry again that it took me a while to get this video to. Hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully USM will have me back, because I really like talking to y'all. Bye.